The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy, older than the stars themselves. It whispers through the corridors of the Jedi Temple, hums beneath the chrome spires of Coruscant, and pulses in the hearts of those who can feel its call. But the Force is not the only power in existence. Beyond the edges of this galaxy, in realities separated by dimensions thinner than a lightsaber's edge, other forces reign, forces of gamma radiation, Asgardian divinity, and something rarer still, a warrior's spirit so pure it resonates with the universe itself. On this night, those worlds would collide. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Senate District of Coruscant gleamed under artificial starlight, its towers stretching endlessly into a sky, choked with speeder lanes and the distant hum of a trillion lives. In the office of Supreme Chancellor Sheev Palpatine, something had gone terribly wrong. 4 Jedi Masters, Mace Windu, Kit Fisto, Aegon Kohler, and CC Tyan, had arrived with grim purpose. The evidence was irrefutable. The Chancellor was a Sith Lord. The most dangerous man in the galaxy had been hiding in plain sight, and now the Jedi had come to end it. The battle had been swift and brutal. Aegon Kohler and CC Tyan fell within seconds, cut down by a ferocity that defied the Chancellor's aged exterior. Kit Fisto lasted moments longer before Palpatine's blade found him too. Only Mace Windu remained, his purple blade locked in furious combat against a monster wearing a politician's face. The Sith Lord fought with savage abandon, years of patient manipulation giving way to something ancient and hungry. Lightning crackled at his fingertips. The dark side surged through the room like a tide. And then Palpatine did something he had not planned. Desperate, cornered, his blade knocked away by Mace Windu's Vapad, a form that turned Sith's own darkness against them. Palpatine unleashed everything. Every reserve of Sith lightning he possessed erupted from his hands in a torrent of crackling, purple-white energy, not at Mace Windu, but outward, wild and uncontrolled, slamming into the transparent steel windows, the walls, the floor, and something else. Something invisible, something thin. The fabric between dimensions screamed. The rift opened without warning. A tear in the air itself, jagged and brilliant, spitting sparks of energy that smelled of ozone and something older. It lasted exactly 4 seconds, long enough for 3 figures to tumble through it at velocity, crashing into the far wall of the Chancellor's office with an impact that cracked durasteel and shattered display cases containing centuries of Republic history. Dust billowed. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in red. Mace Windu did not lower his blade. The first figure rose slowly from the rubble, tall, broad, wrapped in battered armor the color of storm clouds. A broken shaft of something metallic clutched in one massive fist. Blue eyes swept the room with the calm assessment of someone who had woken in stranger places. Thor Odinson, son of Odin, god of thunder, took one breath of recycled Coruscant air and immediately determined 3 things. He was not on Earth. The man in the purple robes on the floor was radiating something deeply wrong, and the warrior standing over him, with the glowing sword, looked like someone worth respecting. The second figure didn't rise so much as erupt. Green, enormous, every muscle coiled with barely contained fury as the Hulk straightened to his full height and surveyed the destroyed office with small, surprisingly intelligent eyes. His chest heaved, his nostrils flared. The smell of the dark side, energy still hanging in the air made something in his gamma radiated. Instincts recoil, it smelled wrong, like a threat he couldn't punch directly. His gaze locked onto Mace Windu's ignited lightsaber, then onto the Sith lightning still sparking along the walls. And the sound that came from his throat was somewhere between a growl and a warning. The third figure stood apart from both of them. Goku touched down lightly on a piece of rubble, his orange GI streaked with dust from the impact, his dark eyes moving across the room with a focus that was almost preternatural. He had been mid-battle, he always was, and the sudden shift in surroundings registered immediately. The smells were wrong. The sounds were wrong. The gravity felt slightly different beneath his feet, and most importantly, The energy in this room was unlike anything he had encountered in his own universe. There was something massive and interconnected, flowing beneath the surface of this world, something that reminded him distantly of the spirit energy he gathered for a spirit bomb, but older, more structured, and divided sharply, painfully divided, between something radiant and something deeply, profoundly dark. His eyes settled on Palpatine, his brow furrowed. Whatever that man was radiating, Goku had felt something like it before. Not in strength, not in technique, but in quality, in the particular flavor of energy that came from someone who had spent a lifetime feeding on the suffering of others. He had felt it in Frisia. He had felt it in Bu. He recognized it the way a warrior recognizes danger before conscious thought catches up. Mace Windu's voice cut through the silence like his blade. Identify yourselves. Now. Thor straightened, his bearing carrying the easy authority of a king. I am Thor, son of Odin, prince of Asgard. I mean no harm to this place, but I demand to know where I am and what manner of sorcery brought us here. Hulk said nothing. Hulk crossed his arms. Goku scratched the back of his head, a habit so deeply ingrained it survived dimensional travel, and looked at Mace Windu with genuine curiosity rather than hostility. Sorry for landing on your stuff. That wasn't on purpose. But I have to ask. His eyes flicked back to the crumpled figure of Palpatine on the floor, and the easy smile faded from his face. What exactly is wrong with that man? Palpatine, battered and trembling on the floor, looked up through ruined eyes at three beings of impossible power who had just fallen from the sky into the middle of his most critical moment. And despite everything, he smiled. Palpatine's smile lasted exactly as long as it needed to. In the span of 3 heartbeats, the most dangerous mind in the galaxy had already rewritten the situation. He lay on the floor of his own office, surrounded by the bodies of 3 Jedi Masters, his face a ruin of burns from reflected lightning, his breathing ragged and deliberate. To anyone watching, he looked like a victim, a frail, elderly statesman brutalized by the very guardians sworn to protect the Republic. And now, impossibly, 3 beings of tremendous power had arrived from nowhere, their origins unknown, their allegiances unestablished. To Palpatine, chaos had never looked so beautiful. Please, his voice cracked perfectly. The practiced tremor of a man pushed beyond endurance. They came to kill me. The Jedi. They said I was a Sith Lord. He let the words dissolve into a cough, one gnarled hand reaching toward no one in particular, a gesture of desperate appeal aimed at the 3 strangers, who had not yet chosen a side. Mace Windu's jaw tightened. Don't listen to him. You would say that, Thor said, not unkindly, his blue gaze moving between the Jedi Master and the crumpled Chancellor, with the measured judgment of someone who had navigated Asgardian court politics for centuries. He did not lower his guard, but he did not advance either. A man stands over another with a weapon drawn. The man on the floor bleeds. These are facts. Everything else requires evidence. The evidence is the 3 dead Jedi behind you, Mace said sharply. Hulk turned, looked at the fallen masters, and a low sound moved through his chest. He had no politics, no allegiance to either party in this room. But something in the way the armored man spoke, clipped, certain, the voice of someone who had already made a decision before entering the room, scraped against instincts sharpened by decades of being hunted by people who were absolutely certain they were right. Hulk did not like people who were certain. Goku had stopped paying attention to the argument. He stood perfectly still in the center of the destroyed office, eyes half closed. His senses turned inward in a way that had nothing to do with the Force and everything to do with a lifetime of reading energy signatures. Every being radiated something. Fighters called it ki, the life force that flowed through all living things and intensified with emotion, intent, and power. Goku had learned to read it the way other men read faces. Mace Windu's energy was turbulent but clean, controlled fury running beneath disciplined restraint, the signature of a warrior who had mastered something violent within himself rather than suppressed it. There was no deception in it. There was grief, fresh, raw grief for the men who had died in this room. The Chancellor's energy was something else entirely. Goku had encountered darkness before. He had faced Frisia, whose cold cruelty radiated like a wound in the universe. He had felt Buu's chaotic destructiveness, a hunger with no direction or purpose. He had stood before Zamasu and felt the particular poison of someone who believed their evil was righteousness. Palpatine's energy reminded him of all three and none of them. It was patient, layered, ancient, in a way that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with deliberate cultivation. Whatever this man was, he had spent a very long time becoming it on purpose. He's lying, Goku said quietly. The room went still. Thor looked at him. You know this how? I can feel it. Goku opened his eyes and looked at Palpatine directly, not with hostility, but with the simple honesty of someone reporting a fact. His energy it's wrong. Not just powerful. Wrong. Like something that chose to become dark instead of falling into it. He paused. I've felt that before. It never ends well. Palpatine's smile did not waver, but something behind his ruined eyes shifted, a microscopic recalculation, the adjustment of a chess player who had just discovered his opponent could see through the board. Remarkable, the Chancellor murmured, his voice shifting from trembling victim to something quieter and more honest. You can sense the force? Without training? Without midichlorians? He allowed genuine curiosity into his voice because genuine curiosity was, in this moment, his most effective weapon. What are you, child? Goku. Just Goku. That's enough. The doors to the Chancellor's office burst open. 6 Senate guards poured through the first entrance, red-robed and armed with force pikes crackling with electrical charges. Behind them came a squad of Coruscant security forces, blasters leveled, tactical visors scanning the destruction with barely concealed panic. They had registered the seismic impact of 3 beings hitting the wall at combat velocity. They had seen the lightning readings from the sensors. They had no framework for what they were looking at, but they had training, and training said, surround the unknown. Demand compliance. Escalate if refused. Nobody move. Hands where we can see them. Hulk looked at the guards. The guards looked at Hulk. One of them, to his credit, did not immediately fire. The others were less disciplined. 3 blaster bolts hit the Hulk in the chest at point-blank range. The smell of scorched gamma radiated. Skin filled the air for exactly 1 second before the Hulk's expression shifted from neutral to deeply, personally offended. The burns were already fading. The irritation was not. Bad idea, Goku said, mostly to himself. What followed was not a battle so much as a demonstration. The Hulk moved through the Senate Guard formation the way a boulder moves through tall grass. Not with malice, but with the simple physics of something immovable encountering something that very much could be moved. Guards were lifted and set aside rather than struck. The Hulk was angry, not murderous. And there was a difference, though the distinction was difficult to appreciate from the floor. Thor covered the secondary entrance with Mjolnir raised, not attacking, but making his position on unauthorized escalation very clear. Goku stood between both groups with his hands open, using his body as a buffer, deflecting force pikes with casual forearm blocks and talking the entire time. Nobody has to get hurt here. Can everyone just stop for a second? Nobody stopped. Mace Windu had not moved from his position over Palpatine. His blade was still lit. His eyes tracked everything with the unnerving calm of a Vapad master in his element. But Goku caught something else in the Jedi's expression, a flicker of calculation. Not about the fight in front of him, but about what these 3 strangers represented. Mace Windu was a man who had just watched his certainty get complicated. In the corner, still on the floor, Palpatine watched it all with the patience of a man who had learned that the best moves in any game were the ones you didn't have to make yourself. The door at the far end of the corridor slammed open again. Anakin Skywalker stood in the frame, chest heaving, eyes wild, taking in the bodies of 3 Jedi Masters, a battered Chancellor, and 3 beings unlike anything in any Jedi archive, all in the span of a single second. His hand found his lightsaber. His eyes found Palpatine on the floor, and the most dangerous variable in the galaxy just walked into the room. Anakin Skywalker's blue blade ignited with a sound like a thunderclap in a quiet room. His eyes swept the destruction with the trained efficiency of a general who had walked into ambushes on 100 worlds, cataloging threats in fractions of a second. 3 Jedi Masters dead. Senate guards scattered and groaning. The Chancellor crumpled against the far wall, his face burned, his robes torn. And standing in the wreckage, 3 beings who radiated power on a scale that made the hair on the back of Anakin's neck stand up in a way that had nothing to do with the Force. He had felt presences before. He had felt Dooku's cold precision, Grievous' mechanical hunger, Ventress's predatory focus. What he felt from these three was different. The tall armored one with the broken hammer carried something ancient and electric that reminded him distantly of Force. Lightning but cleaner, more natural, like a storm that had never been taught to be cruel. The green giant was a wall of barely contained fury, so dense it felt almost physical, pressing against his Force senses like standing too close to a reactor. And the one in orange. Anakin's perception snagged on him and didn't let go. The one in orange felt like nothing he had ever encountered. Not light side, not dark side, not the careful neutrality of the Bendu or the strange Force blindness of beings like Toydarians. It was something outside the spectrum entirely, a key so vast and so genuinely, almost irritatingly pure that it registered in the Force the way a supernova registers, on a ship's sensors, not as a threat, exactly, but as something so large that threat or safety became irrelevant categories. Anakin. Mace Windu's voice was a command wrapped in a warning. Stand down. What happened here? Anakin's eyes hadn't left Palpatine. Is he alive? Palpatine said. And the relief in Anakin's face was immediate and devastating to witness. Anakin, my boy, thank the Force you're here. Goku watched the dynamic shift in real time and felt something tighten in his chest. He had no words for what he was seeing. No political context for the Republic or the Jedi or the Chancellor's office. But he understood people. He had spent his entire life reading fighters. And what he saw on Anakin Skywalker's face when he looked at Palpatine was not the face of a soldier looking at his commanding officer. It was something more complicated and more vulnerable than that. Something that could be used. That man has a hold on him, Goku said quietly, sidling close enough to Thor that only the Asgardian could hear. Whatever's between them, it's not just loyalty. It's dependence. Palpatine knows it too. Thor's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. You read men as well as energy, then. Fighters, mostly. But yeah. The standoff held for a suspended moment. Anakin with his blade lit. Mace with his. The Hulk bristling at the new arrival with fresh suspicion. Thor planted like a monument between two factions that hadn't decided what they were yet. Then Palpatine moved. Not physically. Palpatine was in no condition to move physically. He moved the way he always moved, with words precisely placed. Each one a stone dropped into still water to produce exactly the ripples he needed. Anakin, he said softly, the Jedi came to kill me. Mace Windu led them. And now these beings have arrived in the fighting has not stopped. He let his voice break, slightly on the next words. I don't know what's happening anymore. I'm frightened. It was a masterwork. 20 years of cultivated relationship deployed in 4 sentences. Anakin took one step toward the Chancellor. Mace Windu moved to intercept him. Don't. Anakin, listen to me. The Chancellor is a Sith Lord. We have proof. You have accusations, Anakin said. And the cold edge in his voice was new, raw. The sound of a man whose faith was curdling into something defensive. 3 Jedi are dead. The Chancellor is on the floor. I'm looking at the evidence. Anakin. Enough. The word came from Goku, and it carried enough quiet authority that both Jedi turned to look at him with identical expressions of surprise. He stood between them with his arms at his sides. Not threatening, not posturing, just occupying the space. With the absolute physical calm of someone who had never needed aggression to command a room. I don't know your history, Goku said, addressing Anakin directly with the simple honesty that was his most disarming weapon. I don't know your Republic or your Jedi or why everyone in this room is angry at everyone else. But I know what I felt from that man. He nodded toward Palpatine. And I know what I feel from you. Anakin's blue eyes were dangerous. And what's that? Pain, Goku said simply. A lot of it. The kind people use against you. The silence that followed was different from the ones before it. Less tense, more fragile. It didn't last. The windows of the Chancellor's office, already cracked from the earlier battle, and the dimensional rift's violent arrival, chose this moment to shatter. Completely as a Republic, gunship swung into position outside, its searchlights flooding the room with blinding white. Clone troopers rappelled through the broken transparasteel on magnetic lines. DC-15 rifles, sweeping arcs across every warm body in the room, with the mechanical efficiency of soldiers who had been given a situation, report, and exactly zero context for what they were actually walking into. All personnel, stand down. By order of the Grand Army of the Republic, Hulk had been patient for approximately 4 minutes, which was, by any objective measure, an extraordinary personal record. The first stun bolt that caught him in the shoulder ended the patience. What followed could generously be described as a structural stress test of the Chancellor's office. The Hulk didn't charge the clones with malice. He charged them with the focused frustration of a being who had been shot at continuously since arriving in this galaxy and had reached the precise limit of his tolerance for it. Reinforced durasteel walls buckled. The gunship outside was forced to bank hard to avoid a piece of console the size of a speeder that passed through the window at significant velocity. Clone troopers who had survived, Geonosis and Christophsis and Umbera, scrambled for the corridor with the particular urgency of soldiers who had just recalibrated their definition of the word threat. Thor launched himself upward through the shattered ceiling, Mjolnir spinning, drawing the gunship away from the building with thunderclaps that shook the entire spire and sent cascades of sparks raining down through the Coruscant night. His voice carried across the gap between them, not angry, but enormous, the voice of something that had called down storms on 9 realms. Enough. Stand your weapons down, or I will demonstrate why that is the correct choice. Goku had grabbed Anakin's wrist. Not violently, not even firmly. He had simply put his hand on Anakin's arm the moment the young Jedi moved toward the chaos, and the contact was enough to stop him. Not because Goku's grip was inescapable, though it would have been, but because something passed between them in that moment. The simple warmth of a key signature, so free of ulterior motive that it registered in the Force like an open hand rather than a closed fist. Anakin looked down at the hand on his wrist, then up at the face of a man who had no reason to lie to him and seemed constitutionally incapable of it. Something very bad is about to happen in this galaxy, Goku said quietly, under the noise of crumbling durasteel and Thor's thunderclaps outside. I don't know the details, but whatever that man has been building, his eyes went to Palpatine, still on the floor, still watching everything with those ancient, calculating eyes. It's almost finished, and if you help him finish it, you're going to spend a very long time wishing you hadn't. Anakin's jaw worked. The Force churned around him like weather. Behind them, Palpatine watched the Scion warrior speak to his most valuable piece on the board, and for the first time in 20 years of meticulous planning, Sheev Palpatine felt the cold touch of something he had almost forgotten existed. Genuine uncertainty. Palpatine made his decision in the span of a single breath. The Scion was the problem, not the Green Giant, whose rage was a blunt instrument that could be redirected with the right application of chaos, not the Asgardian, whose warriors' honor made him predictable in the way all honorable men were predictable. Give them a clear enemy, and they would face it directly, leaving their flanks open to subtler maneuvering. The Scion was different. He read energy the way Palpatine read people, and he had no political context to exploit, no fear of institutions, no grief or ambition that could be leveraged. He was, in the most dangerous possible way, simple, not stupid. Palpatine had felt enough of the universe to recognize the difference, but uncomplicated in his motivations in a way that made manipulation nearly impossible. You could not promise a man like that power. He already had it and didn't particularly care. You could not threaten him with loss. He wore his attachments openly and without shame, which paradoxically made them harder to use as weapons. You could not deceive him about your nature. He could feel it. So Palpatine did what he always did when direct manipulation failed. He created a larger problem. The comm unit on the Chancellor's desk, cracked but functional, because Palpatine had designed his office with redundant systems behind redundant systems, transmitted a single coded signal before anyone in the room realized what his trembling hand had done. For words on an Imperial protocol frequency that wouldn't exist for another day, broadcasting to a receiver that had been waiting patiently in the sublevels of the Senate district for exactly this contingency. For words, The Chancellor needs assistance. Mace Windu felt it through the Force. Before the sound reached them, a tremor of something vast and mechanical descending toward the spire, and beneath it, a darkness that was personal and familiar and wrong, in the specific way that only one being in the galaxy managed to be wrong. "We need to move," Mace said, his voice dropping to the clipped urgency of a general abandoning tactics for survival. "Now, all of you. What's coming?" Thor asked from the shattered window, Mjolnir returning to his hand as he dropped back into the room, the gunship outside having retreated to a respectful distance after a thunderclap that had momentarily disrupted every electronic system within a quarter-mile. "The single largest threat this galaxy has produced in 1,000 years, Mace said. He looked at the three outsiders with the expression of a man revising his threat assessment in real time. "And I am beginning to think we need each other." Goku tilted his head. He could feel it too, a dark side signature descending from above, different from Palpatine's cultivated malevolence. Where Palpatine's darkness was ancient and patient, this was immediate and absolute. A darkness that had burned away everything else until only purpose remained. Cold purpose, merciless purpose, something that had once been human and had chosen, piece by piece, to stop being so. "That's a strong one," Goku said quietly. "You have no idea," Mace replied. Anakin had gone very still. He knew the signature too, though he knew it by a different name, by the memory of a man who had taken a frightened 9-year-old boy off a desert planet and given him a future, by 10 years of training and argument and reluctant pride, by the specific frequency of a presence he could find across a solar system without trying. He knew it, and the knowing sat in his chest like a stone. "Obi-Wan," he said. "No," Mace said, and something in his voice made Anakin look at him sharply. "Not Obi-Wan. Not yet. What's coming hasn't happened yet, Anakin. That's the point." He stepped forward, and for the first time in the encounter his lightsaber angled down. Not extinguished, not surrendered, but no longer a threat. The Chancellor transmitted a distress call. "Whatever he summoned will arrive within minutes. When it does, this conversation ends in a war begins, one that's been planned for decades." His eyes found Palpatine with a contempt so absolute it had gone cold. "He wants chaos. He needs Anakin to act in the next 60 seconds before anyone has time to think." Palpatine said nothing. His silence was its own confirmation. Anakin looked at the Chancellor, really looked. The way Goku's words had cracked. Something open that 10 years of careful conditioning had kept sealed. He looked at the burns on the old man's face and felt the reflex of grief and guilt and protectiveness that had been cultivated in him like a garden since he was 9 years old. Then he looked at the 3 dead Jedi Masters on the floor. Then he looked at Palpatine's hand, still near the comm unit, and thought about how quickly it had moved for a man too injured to stand. "What did you transmit?" Anakin asked. Palpatine's expression didn't change. "A call for help, my boy? Surely you can't fault an old man for. What did you transmit?" The temperature in Goku's ki shifted almost imperceptibly. Not a threat, a readiness. The difference between a fighter at rest and a fighter who has just decided that the next few seconds matter. Hulk, who had been unusually quiet since the clone engagement, straightened slowly from his crouch near the far wall. His nostrils flared. Something in the air above the building had changed, a pressure shift. Electromagnetic, massive. He looked up through the shattered ceiling at the Coruscant sky and made a sound that functioned as a warning. The first TIE precursor interceptors screamed past the window in tight formation. Behind them, descending through the artificial cloud layer with the slow inevitability of a geological event, came a Venator-class Star Destroyer that had been repositioned 3 days ago on Palpatine's private order. Its hangar bays already open, clone battalions already mobilizing on its launch decks, and standing on the bridge of that destroyer, receiving the Chancellor's coded transmission with the expressionless acknowledgement of a man who had been waiting his entire manufactured life for orders that mattered. Was Commander Fox of the Coruscant Guard. But it was what came down the corridor outside the Chancellor's office that truly changed the shape of the night. The doors did not open. They were cut open, a circle of superheated metal falling inward. And through the smoking frame stepped 2 figures in black, red-bladed lightsabers already ignited. their faces hidden behind masks. That had been designed to inspire exactly one emotion in everyone who saw them. The Inquisitors. Not the Inquisitors of the Empire that hadn't yet been declared. These were something older. Something Palpatine had kept in reserve for contingencies. Dark side adepts trained in secret beneath the Jedi Temple itself, answering only to the Chancellor's most private frequency. They had been prepared for the possibility that the Jedi arrest attempt might succeed. They had been prepared for many things. They had not been prepared for the Hulk. The first Inquisitor ignited their spinning, double-bladed saber and moved with the fluid precision of a dark side warrior, only to be caught mid-lunge by a green fist the size of a speeder engine. The impact was not subtle. The Inquisitor described a long arc through the air and removed a significant portion of the far wall on their way out of the conversation. The second Inquisitor was faster and smarter, disengaging immediately and redirecting toward Goku, reading him correctly as the most dangerous variable in the room. Their blade spun in a defensive spiral, dark side energy crackling along its edge, and they attacked with the savage efficiency of someone trained to kill. Force users with abilities beyond the standard Jedi toolkit. Goku blocked the first strike with his forearm, felt the lightsaber's plasma edge score his GI, and stopped there. His ki density was sufficient at this level to prevent serious damage, though the heat was genuinely unpleasant, and stepped inside the Inquisitor's guard with a movement so fast the dark side adept simply did not process it in time. An open palm strike to the center of the chest, measured, precise, enough force to conclude the engagement without ending the person. The Inquisitor hit the ceiling, then the floor, and did not get up. Thor had Mjolnir raised toward the Star Destroyer's forward batteries, lightning already building around his arms in spirals of blinding white gold. "I would strongly suggest," he said to the ship above, in a carrying voice that needed no amplification, "that you reconsider your targeting solutions." The forward batteries held. Nobody in the galaxy had faced Thor before. Nobody in the galaxy had a doctrine for him. Mace Windu stood over Palpatine, blade at his throat, and looked across the ruined office at Goku with an expression that had moved entirely past surprise into something that looked almost like respect. "We have approximately 4 minutes before that destroyer locks a tractor beam on this building," he said. "I need you to make a choice." Goku looked at Anakin, who was standing motionless in the center of the room, his lightsaber extinguished, his face carrying the particular devastation of someone watching a lie they had built there. Life on collapse in real time. "The choice isn't mine," Goku said. He walked to Anakin and stopped in front of him, hands loose at his sides. Nothing in his expression but honest attention. "It's his." Above them, the Star Destroyer's tractor beam array began to hum. Anakin Skywalker had made decisions before that changed the shape of history. He had chosen to free a slave woman's son on Tatooine by winning a pod race. He had chosen to hold Padme's hand in a meadow on Naboo when the code said he shouldn't. He had chosen to go back for Obi-Wan on Christophsis when the mission said leave. Every significant moment of his life had been a choice that his instincts made before his mind caught up, and the Force had always confirmed them with that particular warmth that meant yes. This here, the Force was very warm right now. He looked at Goku, this stranger from nowhere, this man with no rank and no agenda and no history in this galaxy, who had arrived in the middle of the most consequential moment in Republic history and somehow managed to be the only person in the room who wasn't trying to use him, and felt something unlock in his chest that he hadn't known was sealed. "He's been lying to me," Anakin said. "Not a question." "For a long time," Goku said quietly. "I think you already knew." Anakin closed his eyes. In the Force, he reached, not outward, not toward Palpatine or Mace or the descending destroyer, but inward, toward the place where Padme existed in his consciousness like a second heartbeat, toward the vision that had driven him here, the nightmare of her death that Palpatine had been carefully, deliberately watering like a poisonous plant for months. He reached inward, and he felt the shape of the manipulation clearly for the first time. It was exquisite work. He could appreciate that even now, the patience of it, the architecture, a vision introduced at precisely the right moment, tended with precisely the right words, a door left open to the dark side framed not as seduction, but as salvation. "I can save her. Only through me. Only if you trust me. Only if you choose me over everything else. Anakin opened his eyes. I'm done, he said. Palpatine's composure fractured. For exactly 1 second. A hairline crack in a facade. Maintained for 2 decades. And in that second, every person in the room who could feel the Force felt the dark side surge with something that was almost beneath all its power and malice, recognizable as panic. Then the crack sealed, and Darth Sidious looked out through Palpatine's ruined face. You, he said, and his voice was no longer trembling or cracked or performing anything at all, have made a catastrophic mistake, my boy. The dark side erupted, not as lightning this time, as pressure, a force push of such magnitude that it wasn't a push so much as a detonation, a shockwave of telekinetic energy that expanded from Palpatine's position in every direction simultaneously, designed not to target, but to destroy everything within range indiscriminately. The walls cracked. The floor buckled. Mace Windu was hurled backward with enough force to crack the reinforced durasteel behind him, his lightsaber spinning away, his consciousness flickering at the impact. Anakin caught himself on a pillar, teeth gritted, pushing back through the Force with everything he had. Thor drove Mjolnir's head into the floor and held. Hulk leaned into it like weather. Goku didn't move at all. He stood in the center of the shockwave, with his feet planted and his ki rising to meet it, not fighting the Force so much as existing in opposition to it. His energy a warm gold against the cold violence of the dark side detonation. His hair flickered, the first edges of a transformation beginning and then, consciously, deliberately held back. Not here. Not yet. He wanted to understand what he was facing before he escalated. And he was a long way from his ceiling. Palpatine rose from the floor. Not the trembling politician. Not the wounded statesman. He rose the way the Sith rose, with absolute confidence in his own supremacy, his robes falling in burned tatters, his face a ruin that he wore like a crown. Lightning gathered at his hands in quantities that made the earlier exchange with Mace Windu look like sparks from a campfire. His presence in the Force expanded to fill the room, the building, the surrounding district, a darkness so cultivated and so vast that it pressed against the minds of every Force-sensitive and coruscant, like a physical weight. I have been patient for 30 years, Sidious said, and his voice had dropped to something that resonated in the chest cavity rather than the ears. I have built this moment from nothing. I have shaped this war from its first breath, and I will not have it undone by 3 wanderers from a reality that shouldn't exist. Thor stepped forward, Mjolnir rising, lightning answering him from the shattered sky above. You talk, he said with the blunt assessment of a man who had faced genuine gods. More than you should. He threw Mjolnir. Palpatine caught it. Not with his hands, with the Force. A telekinetic arrest that stopped. The hammer 3 feet from his face in a corona of conflicting energies. Dark side power grinding against. Asgardian enchantment in a display that cracked the remaining windows in a 6-block radius and dropped 2 nearby speeders out of their lanes. Mjolnir strained toward its master, worthy and furious, and Palpatine strained back. And for a long, terrible moment, it was genuinely unclear which would give. Then the Hulk hit Palpatine from the side. Not a punch, a tackle, the full weight of the strongest being in his universe, driven by every gram of accumulated rage from an afternoon of being shot at, struck with Force pikes, caught in dimensional rifts, and generally treated as an obstacle rather than a person. The impact took Palpatine off his feet and through the wall, through the corridor beyond it, and into the Senate antechamber in an avalanche of durasteel and ancient Republic masonry. Mjolnir completed its journey to Thor's hand. The dust settled. From the antechamber came sounds that suggested the engagement was ongoing, specifically, the sustained crackling of Sith lightning meeting something that absorbed it with increasing irritation rather than damage. The Hulk was, functionally, immune to electricity at standard application levels. Palpatine was not operating at standard application levels, and the lightning was visibly having some effect. But the effect was primarily making the Hulk angrier, which was solving Palpatine's immediate problem in the same way that adding fuel to a fire solves the problem of insufficient warmth. Goku crossed the rubble in 4 steps and dropped through the hole in the wall. The antechamber was enormous, a vaulted space of Republic-era grandeur. its ceiling painted with the sigils of 1,000-member worlds. Its floor now considerably less pristine than its architects had intended. Palpatine stood in the center of it, lightning pouring from both hands in sustained torrents, the Hulk absorbing it with his arms, crossed and an expression of mounting personal grievance. The Sith Lord's power was extraordinary. Goku could feel it pressing against his ki like a tide, but it was built on a specific architecture, the dark side's fundamental principle. That pain and passion and the will to dominate were the ultimate source of strength. Goku's power was built on something else entirely. He powered up slowly, deliberately, letting it build in layers, not a performance, but a process. The systematic unlocking of limiters, developed over decades of training against opponents who had forced him to his ceiling and then watch him build a new one. The golden aura came first, crackling with the specific energy of a Super Saiyan transformation, and the Force reacted to it in a way that Goku hadn't anticipated, not with resistance, but with resonance. The living force, the energy that connected all things, recognized something in the Saiyans. He and leaned toward it the way a plant leans toward light. Palpatine felt it and understood, for the first time, that he was genuinely outmatched. He had one move left. His eyes found Anakin Skywalker standing in the hole in the wall, watching everything. And Darth Sidious made the only play remaining to him. Not power, not lightning, but the oldest weapon he had ever wielded against this particular man. "Anakin," he said, his voice cutting through the storm of energy filling the room. "She will still die? Whatever happens here today, Padme will die. And I am the only being in this galaxy who knows how to prevent it. Kill them. Kill them all, and I will teach you everything." The room held its breath. Anakin looked at Palpatine, then at Goku, standing in his golden aura with no agenda and no manipulation and no history between them. Then at Mace Windu, who had arrived through the secondary entrance and stood with his recovered blade lit, silent, waiting. Then at the painted ceiling above, 1,000 worlds. A republic that was already gone even if nobody had announced it yet. He looked at all of it, and he made his choice. His lightsaber ignited. He pointed it at Palpatine. "Teach me nothing," Anakin said. "Ever again." What followed was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was a reckoning. Goku engaged Palpatine directly, his golden aura pushing back the dark side, tied with a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with the fundamental incompatibility of genuine joy with cultivated malice. The Hulk kept Palpatine from retreating or repositioning, a living wall that reduced the Sith Lord's tactical options to a steadily shrinking corridor. Thor controlled the airspace above, holding off the Star Destroyer's initial bombardment with thunderclaps that disrupted targeting systems and made the clone gunners question everything they believed about the laws of physics. And Mace Windu and Anakin Skywalker fought Darth Sidious together, not as master and student, not with the political weight of the Jedi Order behind them, but as two warriors who had both, in different ways, been shaped by this man's influence and had chosen, in this moment, to be shaped by it no longer. Palpatine was extraordinary. He was also, for the first time in 3 decades, surrounded. The lightning came in waves, each one calibrated to a different target, each one a masterwork of combat sorcery. That would have ended any conventional engagement instantly. Goku redirected 2 volleys with his palms, feeling the dark side energy dissolve against his ki like salt in warm water. The Hulk took a direct strike to the chest that would have stopped a capital ship's reactor and responded by grabbing the floor and pulling a section of antechamber masonry, the size of a speeder, hurled with the accuracy of pure instinct, forcing Palpatine to break his concentration and dodge. For the first time in the entire fight, in that half-second of broken focus, Mace Windu was there. The purple blade found Palpatine's hand, his right hand, his lightning hand, and the Sith Lord's scream was not pain so much as the sound of absolute certainty, meeting its first genuine limit. He fell, not dead, not destroyed. The Sith were rarely so conveniently mortal, but diminished, critically, functionally, irreversibly diminished in this moment, his connection to the dark side fluctuating, as physical shock disrupted decades of sustained focus. He lay on the floor of the antechamber, among the painted sigils of 1,000 worlds, and looked up at the faces surrounding him. And what crossed his expression was not defeat, but adjustment, the calculation of a mind that was already identifying the next move, the next angle, the next decade of patient rebuilding. Goku crouched down to Palpatine's level. "It's over," he said simply. Palpatine looked at him with eyes like ancient ice. "Nothing," he said softly, "is ever over." "Maybe," Goku said, "but today is." Above the Senate District, the Star Destroyer held its position as commander. Fox received a direct transmission from 3 sources. Simultaneously, the Jedi Council, a Naboo senator whose voice carried an authority that cut through military protocol, and something that was broadcasting on no frequency his equipment should have been able to receive, in a voice that made his clone conditioning feel briefly, inexplicably inadequate. The destroyer held. The clone battalion stood down. The Coruscant night, which had been building toward the sound of Empire, went quiet. In the antechamber, Anakin Skywalker extinguished his blade and stood over the fallen Sith Lord and felt the future, not through vision, not through prophecy, but through the simple absence of the voice that had been in his ear for years. The absence of the fear that had been driving him toward a cliff. He could now see clearly. He turned to Goku. "You said you could feel pain in people's energy," Anakin said. Goku nodded. "Can you feel when it's gone?" Goku was quiet for a moment. Then something genuinely warm moved across his face, not performed comfort, but the honest recognition of one fighter to another, of someone who understood what it cost to choose differently than you'd been built to choose. "Yeah," he said, "I can feel that too." The galaxy did not change in a single night. It never did. Palpatine was taken into custody by a Jedi council that had survived by the thinnest possible margin. His plans exposed not through political maneuvering or prophetic vision, but through the arrival of 3 beings who had no stake in the game and therefore could not be played. The Senate convened an emergency session within hours. The evidence of decades of Sith manipulation spreading through Republic channels like light through a cracked door, slow at first, then everywhere at once. Anakin Skywalker did not fall. That alone rewrote everything. Thor remained long enough to ensure the Star Destroyer stood down permanently. His presence on Coruscant's skyline becoming the subject of 10,000 hollow images, and twice as many confused Senate inquiries about extraterrestrial diplomatic protocol. The Hulk, remarkably, was given provisional sanctuary by a Naboo senator who argued with characteristic precision that beings who had materially prevented a Sith coup deserved at minimum the courtesy of not being immediately imprisoned. Goku spent 3 days on Coruscant, mostly in the temple gardens, sitting with Jedi younglings who were fascinated by his ki and had approximately 400 questions he answered, with complete honesty and zero condescension. On the 4th day, a rift opened again, quieter this time, almost gentle, and 3 warriors stepped through it back toward their own reality, carrying nothing from the galaxy far, far away except the particular satisfaction of a fight that had mattered. The Force remembered them. It always would. May the Force be with you.